I was kind of listening to you two, thinking to myself, is what we're going through right now unusual? Is this a moment in history where what we're seeing is kind of revolutionary or new? And I keep thinking back to the fact that, if you say we're in unprecedented times, you basically haven't read much history. And you guys might know this. There's been 70 bank failures in the past decade. There's been over 500 bank failures since the end of the GFC. So it's not like bank failures don't happen. Certainly the timeline that we've been through has been raucous, and it's kept all of us kind of glued to our screens and glued to watching you guys and glued to our terminals. But where we go from here is interesting. I will say that I think I'm calling this like a mini banking crisis. I don't think this is at the same level of the GFC. I agree with Julie on that. Is the mini banking crisis over? I think it's closer to ending than it is to beginning. The things that the government and the regulators are doing make sense to me. Ring fencing depositors make sense to me. I would even argue, my friends, that this might actually be helping the Fed a little bit. At the margins, is this mini banking crisis helping the Fed? It probably is, right? It's going to send a deflationary impulse through the economy. Credit conditions will tighten, lending will tighten. So they may not have wanted this to be one of the things that helped them, but I think this ultimately will help fight inflation, maybe much more so than a rate hike.
I mean, that makes sense to some extent. What I'm curious to ask, Mike, is why we are still seeing these regional banks under such pressure, even with all of these lifelines being thrown out.
It's a great question, Julie. I was thinking about my answer when you guys were talking about it. Here's what I keep coming back to. This is what markets do. Markets probe stress. And they will find it sometimes. They'll find the weak points and they'll drive into the weak points. Sometimes when they probe stress, they hit a roadblock and then that's it. But that's what's happening right now. Markets are going to probe stress until this moment has passed. And like you said, the actions of regulators and the Fed makes sense to me. The discount window lending makes sense to me. What these big banks are doing makes sense to me. It might be creating a feedback loop of big banks giving money to small banks, which ends up in big banks. But this is what markets do. They test stress, and we're still in that testing period.